Good morning and welcome to the August edition of Mytech U. Today we're going to talk about technology's best unknown return on investment. And we're fortunate to have three subject matter experts on the phone from Dell SonicWall, Eric Nora, Scott LaGrange, and Tyler Wilson. And today we're going to go through one of the best unknown secret, which is your network security appliance. Most people, if you have an internet connection, you're going to have a firewall. But they're not used very well, but it's one of the best kept secrets as far as where you can find some real return on investment for your technology dollar. So we are going to move right along here into the presentation. Today we're really going to cover areas where how can the firewall and how can the network security appliance and leveraging the technology effectively improve staff productivity. We're going to do some cost calculators or savings calculators on each one of these on this one. Then we're going to talk about some risk mitigation and how that can relate to cost savings, and there'll be some cost savings calculators on that section. And then we're going to dig into some of the current trends that we see with Web 2.0 and people migrating their infrastructure to hosted environments and more mobility, et cetera, and some of the new technology that's out there that will set your organization up for success in the future to be able to adapt and make sure that you can leverage that technology but still maintain a secure environment. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back and forth between the SonicWall folks, the Dell SonicWall folks, and myself as we go through these. So, moving on to improving staff productivity, if you do some research online, you'll find that it's difficult to get a full 8 hours of productivity out of most employees. Now, as people try and improve productivity and put those metrics, I want to make sure that we're not talking about trying to be a big brother here. We're just talking about trying to reinforce what you probably already have in place, which is your computer and internet use policy, and work to mitigate that by at least maybe a little bit. See if we can get maybe 7 hours of productivity or help increase that by just a little bit. And what we find that people do when they have that downtime or when they feel a little lethargic or they feel like, gosh, I need a distraction, is that they typically turn to internet time wasters. And that one YouTube video, if you've ever been caught in that cycle, turns into 5 or 10 or 20 YouTube videos that's also taking a lot of bandwidth out of your organization. So I'm not saying completely block that stuff, but we're going to dig into how, let's focus on some little wins that we can do by helping increase that productivity from the 6.5 hours and helping simple things from blocking social media. So what can you do? And I'll hand that over to the SonicWall guys to maybe talk a little bit about that.
Hi, thank you. This is Scott LaGrange with SonicWall. Some of the things that you can look at doing is a lot of times we'll wonder what's going on in the workplace, and we'll want to see what our employees are doing and how our employees' productivity is going. So by using your Dell SonicWall appliance, some of the nice things we can do is we can run reports in real time to take a look at what traffic is being utilized. Maybe you have an SAP application or you have a Salesforce.com application that's required for your business, but you have customers that are telling you, man, this is slow today, or your employees are telling you this is slow today. Well, as the administrator of your network, you can go and take a look and say, oh, I got a bunch of people on YouTube or on Pandora or things like that, and you can, with one click, you can block that application for certain users, for everybody. So it's a pretty neat, quick insight into what's happening in your network. Nate, if you want to advance that slide for me. Just here as well, you can see, you can drill down to the individual users' names to see exactly what they've been doing and how long they've been working on that quote-unquote application or in that quote-unquote protocol, to see what exactly is going on and where their day has been spent doing. What have they been doing? Who's taking up all that top bandwidth, and what is that bandwidth being used for? So again, just another quick look in to see what's going on and to see how quickly you can get this information. I mean, these are just one-page views. As soon as you log into the appliance, you can get that information.
Yeah, thank you, Scott, for that. Because one of the things that is pretty common in today's world is having some content filtering capabilities like what Scott was talking about, is being able to identify what is taking up the bandwidth and how can you enforce some policies. And Scott mentioned one way that you can do that, which is you can block it. But there's lots of other things you can do too, such as putting time parameters around it, right? So maybe you allow people to browse YouTube over the lunch hour and before 8 a.m. and after 5 p.m., but you block it between 8 and noon and 1 and 5. You can restrict it on a per user basis. So, from a subtle win perspective, you can focus on just enabling some basic content filtering capabilities to realize some of these gains. And this technology already exists, and quite frankly, you probably already own it. It's just a matter of tweaking it and tuning it to your organization to help enforce the way your organization needs to operate, and the team and the people in your organization and how they need to leverage the internet resources. So, and what Scott was also talking about is the different views when you log into the firewall. But for most of our customers, and I would imagine most other small businesses in the community that have a management program with an IT provider, is that they receive firewall reports on a maybe weekly, if not monthly basis. So you don't necessarily have to look at these or take a point of logging into the firewall, because most of our customers don't even do that. But if you have, of course, if you're an IT person or you have your own IT staff, they'll probably be doing that. But there are firewall reports that you're going to get on a, again, weekly or monthly basis that provides a lot of this same information. And we have people standing by that can easily help you interpret those reports and understand and make some recommendations around how you can maybe make some adjustments that can improve the utilization. And the point is, we're not trying to stop people from using YouTube. There could be some general business cases for people in the organization to use YouTube. For instance, we record this session and we post it to our YouTube page. So we need to be able to use YouTube to conduct our business. The point is just to reinforce the way in which your people need to operate and make sure that if YouTube is interfering with your Salesforce.com application, as Scott was suggesting, then we ought to do something with YouTube to make sure that Salesforce.com takes priority. So that's part of reviewing your firewall reports and understanding what misuse might be occurring in your organization, so that you can put some simple policies in place and help your technology enforce what your HR policies already state. And really, it's simple. When we say focus on subtle wins, we just really want to decrease kind of the goof off or the wasted time by 5 to 10%. Keep it simple. We're not trying to be Big Brother. We're not trying to reduce or eliminate internet use. It's just see if we can reduce it by just a little bit, and you'll see the kind of productivity gains you can have. And so we'll do some cost analysis on that here on the next slide. Now, let's just do an average organization or a small organization of, say, 30 people. Now, you may be smaller, you may be a 10-person firm, you may be a 500-person firm. These numbers will scale respectively to your staff size. An average payroll of 40K, that may be a little high or maybe a little low for your organization, I'm not sure, but that's just picking a number. You take 30 people times average salary of 40K. Now, granted, I also know for those of you who may be accountants or financial folks on the line, we're well aware that 40K is probably not your total cost of that staff person with benefits and 401K programs and things like that. But for the sake of keeping the math simple, 30 people times 40K a year, that's $1.2 million. Well, if we can have, by just adjusting your firewall and fine-tuning little pieces such as throttling YouTube or blocking it so it's only available during the lunch hour and after hours, you can, if a 5 or 10% gain could realize you $60,000 to $120,000 of savings annually, right? So this is a firewall or an appliance that costs probably the lifespan over 5 years for most 30-person firms less than $10,000. And that includes management, that includes security subscriptions and the appliance itself. So for a less than a $10,000 investment, to be able to get just in this one area $60,000 to $120,000 of return on investment or an annual savings, that's a huge return on investment, and you're not going to find anything similar to that in any other technology that you're probably investing in for your organization today. Then I put some numbers in for a 10-person firm and a 70-person firm. You can still get a significant annual savings looking at these numbers. So there's a quick cost calculator. So now we're going to move over to, and that's just by enforcing some basic content filtering. Now we're going to move over to some risk mitigation, because just being able to throttle bandwidth or making sure that the internet's being used for business purposes is really only part of the equation. So by risk mitigation, you can also realize some cost savings too. So what we're going to cover here is spyware, malware, and viruses. You know, it's a security risk, and it's going to impact your productivity of your people because it's going to slow down your machines or make them unavailable for IT cleanup. We'll talk about that in here a little bit. You know, bandwidth is an expensive utility. You know, I was just working with an organization yesterday that's looking at spending, they have 2 locations, they're only a 40-some person firm, and they've got thousands of dollars a month in bandwidth to provide the service that they need for their operations. And it's an expensive utility, and we should do some things to manage it. So what are some of the things we can do? So to start, I'm going to hand this over to either Scott or Eric, and they can talk about some of the top security drivers for 2013 and how it affects you know, risk mitigation.
Yeah, thanks, Nate. This is Eric. So, yeah, obviously the threats out there are getting much more robust and complicated. The top 10 security drivers of 2013 are getting really complicated, and you can see we could spend an hour in itself just talking about each one of these. But for the attendees, just take a look at what these are. This is the stuff that's out there. This is the reason why you need to have all your services turned on the firewall, and why you need the horsepower and the speeds and feeds, so it's not slowing down your network while you have these turned on.
So Eric, what you're saying there is that, you know, that's one of the challenges is providing security causes overhead. So and sometimes that what has happened over the last several years that you know, with firewalls and advancement of that technology to impact that part of the world. I don't know, Scott, maybe you want to elaborate on that.
Yeah, you know, there's a lot of things that the firewalls have done to try and enhance the security. So in our latest generation, we put in an anti-botnet feature built into it. And what that means to our customers that are out there is, you know, a lot of times we'll see that, you know, especially small business, they don't have the means of to be able to scan PCs every day, or they might not have their virus software might not be up to date and things like that. A lot of times malware will come in, and it'll come in from either an email or a website or something like that, and then it'll communicate back to a command and control center that's usually overseas somewhere. And now the nice thing is with this anti-botnet capabilities built in, you can now look into the firewall and say, why are we having this particular computer talking to China all the time? We don't do any business in China. Well, that's a red flag instantly right there that something's going on in your network, and we can help you trace that back into your network where it's originating from to try and shut that down. Same thing with GeoIP location. You know, it tells us where the top talkers on your network are going out to and where the top traffic is coming into in your network to try and help alleviate some of those security risks that you're going to see as we continue to move forward in this new world that we call Web 2.0.
So Scott, it's similar to the report that we looked at earlier, where we were able to identify users and the percentage of traffic. There are other views that we're not showing in this presentation, but that show either users and where their traffic's going, or just general traffic and the geography, such as if it's going to Russia or Thailand or some of the
Absolutely.
The nations that are known for malicious content and attacks from a cyber perspective.
Absolutely, and you can block traffic coming if you know that you're not going to do any. If you know that you don't do any business with Russia or China or the Ukraine, which are very big hotbeds for cybersecurity issues, we can block those domains or those areas from even being able to accept or deliver traffic to and from that area through your existing firewall.
So, Scott, one last question on this particular slide. You know, most organizations have local antivirus on their PCs, and most organizations have spam filtering on their email, which also, you know, filters for viruses. But a lot of these attacks we're seeing, they're coming through general web traffic. So can you speak to that a little bit as far as that's why you need a kind of a multi-layered approach, and how the security appliance actually addresses where the trending of attacks are coming as they're coming through typical, you know, web traffic or hacked websites, things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of times what we're seeing now is that traffic's actually coming from legitimate websites. What they're doing is they're embedding malicious code into a legitimate website. If you go to CNN.com or you go to NBCnews.com, you see all over the sides of the pages they have other stories and related articles and things like that. But what people are doing is they're putting that information, that malicious code, into those trending articles and things like that. Well, what the firewall will do is the firewall will actually, as you're reading that information, and as traffic's passing from your computer to the outbound network, the WAN, and back in, the firewall's constantly scanning the network, constantly scanning that traffic. If you have the feature turned on, it'll scan that traffic real time as it's coming in. If it sees an anomaly once it hits the firewall, it'll then send that traffic out to the cloud, scan it against all the signatures that are out there, which currently there's over 15 million signatures out there. It'll scan it against those. If it sees an anomaly there as well, it'll drop that packet, drop that traffic, reset the packet, and reset the port so that traffic's not getting into your network, and try and stop it at the gateway level.
Yeah, Scott, that's one of the things that, is, if it's not that it's brand new, but this is definitely the direction that from people trying to embed, get people to download malware or spyware or keyloggers or et cetera, is trying to hack or infuse their code into legitimate sites. It could be a common, very popular YouTube video. I mean, that's one thing that I know went around is when you get a popular YouTube video that goes viral, people will make copies of it and they'll embed malicious code, and in hopes that someone might download it to watch it. Well, while you watch this video that seems innocuous, it actually is downloading code. Well, the firewall and what Scott was describing can actually protect you from that kind of stuff. You just have to have these features turned on. So again, it's technology that, quite frankly, most of you probably already own. It's just whether or not you've got it configured and fine-tuned specifically to look for this, as well as to protect your organization. And as Eric had mentioned, where the critical part about this is that these threats, as more and more threats come out, I mean, Scott said 15 million different signature sets out there. It takes overhead and horsepower and to be able to filter all of that information. And I imagine that you as a business don't want that information filtered. Let's say, hey, firewall gives you a message that says, give me a minute. I'm going to filter this information that you just clicked, right? People don't want that. You need instantaneous access. It's going to affect your productivity. It's going to affect the way you use anything that's internet-based. So the firewall has to perform in milliseconds in order to respond effectively to your staff and your organization. So that's where Scott is going to spend a little bit of time later talking about some of the speeds and feeds and why this plays into delivering the security to protect you from all these components, but yet giving you the performance that you need so that you actually are realizing the bandwidth that you're paying for your internet connection.
And Nate, if I could add something here, you can't control what you can't see, right? So the great thing with SonicWall IP and our deep packet inspection is that it allows the admin to run reports on if there's any malware packets coming through within graphs, charts and graphs to show what it's stopped and what it's contained through the network. So it's a great thing with our deep packet inspection for the admin to see exactly what's going in and out of their network and what's being stopped at the gateway.
That's a great point, and that's where those similar reports that we were talking about as far as identifying either users or geo-IPs, things like that. Right. There's also graphs and reports that show malware and that kind of stuff too. So, and giving visibility into that content. So, yeah, great point. So, the top bullet there is really you really should turn on and make sure you're enforcing your intrusion prevention services, right? Some organizations, and this is where one of the indicators to advance your firewall is potentially with regard to whether or not. So I'm getting a little static on the line here, so forgive me on that. But it is sometimes when you might be running into a performance issue, we've seen it where we've seen network administrators turn off intrusion prevention. Yes, you're going to get a performance gain by doing that, but that is not going to help protect your organization. So you want to make sure that the firewall is scaled correctly so you can deliver the security on intrusion prevention that is built into your network security appliance. So here's some basic numbers that these are actually conservative estimates because I didn't put in estimates of what hours of lost productivity might be, and I didn't put in any dollars as far as what fines and penalties might be, but I'll give you a couple examples of those. But for instance, if, let's say you have a 30-person firm, well, actually we'll get to that slide later, but from doing the calculator, but if you if you do a rebuild of a machine, I know that organizations like ours charge, somewhere in the ballpark of $250 a machine to rebuild it. So if you get a machine that's infected with spyware or viruses and it needs to get to the point where it needs to be rebuilt, you're going to have lost productivity of your staff person because they're going to be without a machine for several hours, and you're going to have to pay IT support to be able to do that. So those are some of the cost savings you can realize, again, by simply turning on the technology that you already have. Another point is, especially if you're in a regulated industry, having intrusion prevention turned on is a requirement because that can help prevent breach of data and leakage of information as well as security. So an example of that, I've even seen there was a recent article that I read where someone had, it was a copier that had got information out, and they were it was in a HIPAA regulated environment, and it was $1.2 million in fines and penalties and legal fees. So simple things can cost you a lot of money if you're in those regulated industries. So I haven't even factored that into the return on investment factor here, but you can definitely see how it can have an impact on your organization if you're not addressing it. So the next thing I definitely wanted to talk about is, along the risk mitigation, is that bandwidth is an expensive utility, and so I'm going to hand it over to again either Scott or Eric for the next slide, which is going to talk about how can you effectively manage the bandwidth and the content going in and out of your firewall. So I'm going to hand this over to them with this slide so they can speak to how the firewall can handle managing the bandwidth effectively.
Yeah, thanks, Nate. This is Eric. Say, just real quick, I just want to tee this up that, these are the traits of a next-generation firewall. And Dell SonicWall, we do a fantastic job with our deep packet inspection. So if you look at this slide, it's identify, categorize, and control. So basically, it's real-time traffic visualization, who's doing what online. We're basically prioritizing applications, mission-critical applications. So you have your guys, and Scott will get into a little bit more details about specific popular applications and who's doing what. But you look at your applications that are coming into, or who's using what application on your network, and what you want to allow them to do within that application. So we're basically scanning at the application level. We're not scanning at the port level. So Scott, why don't you take it to the next step?
Yeah. So as you see there on that slide there, we're looking at a couple different aspects, right? The biggest thing that we try to look at is we try to look at what the traffic is. Again, we want to give you, the customer, the highest priority for your mission critical applications. And we're seeing a lot of times nowadays that that's Salesforce, that's SAP, things like that. But the same token, maybe the marketing department needs to have access to Facebook. Well, that's fine. We can give them access to Facebook, and we can give them a limited set of bandwidth, but we're going to restrict the Facebook games while they're there. Or we're going to give you access to LinkedIn today at your company, but again, I'm not going to give you access to the LinkedIn job site because I don't want you looking for a new job while you're at my company. So those are some of the features that we can do with the Layer 7 application control that we're doing as we're diving into that packet of what that user is doing on the network. We can see everything that they're doing. Oh, and by the way, we don't want BitTorrent on our network because we know there's a lot of viruses and malware and spyware that come in on BitTorrent and LimeWire and things like that. So we're going to completely block that stuff. Excuse me, if you're a school, we're going to allow your YouTube for Education account at the firewall level. So if you're a 1st through 4th grade, you're limited to the type of content that you can see based on your YouTube for School, YouTube for Education account that you created with YouTube. That's the only application that you can get. That's the only information on YouTube you can get. So we can get very granular with the information that we can allow those people to see, those end users to see, to make your business more stable, make your network better, make your network faster, and keep all that stuff out of the network that you guys don't want in the network. And all while we're doing that, we're also blocking malware and viruses and stuff like that at the gateway level.
Scott, that's great stuff, and this is where I know as we deploy these kind of technologies, there are not that many organizations that actually dig in at this level and do that. But and especially in the last several years, but more and more today, we're seeing. In fact, just yesterday, I was working with an organization where they identified, you look at some of the in the bubble here or the cloud here on the left side of the screen, you see VoIP is one of the things on there, and you talk about something like a Salesforce.com or an Oracle. I was working with an organization just in the last couple days where they have their VoIP traffic coming from a remote facility, and they have their key database that they're trying to make sure they have connectivity, and they're having issues connecting. Well, part of the problem is they're not managing their bandwidth, so they haven't prioritized the fact that their VoIP calls should take priority over general web browsing traffic. So some of the stuff you're talking about here on the right side, saying critical apps, well, Oracle, VoIP, they're critical apps. So let's make sure that they've got the right bandwidth, and that they're so that if other web browsing traffic might have a chance of interfering, we can throttle the web browsing traffic and make sure that the VoIP and the database traffic gets a higher priority. So, I mean, there's real applications to making sure that, because that's affecting their production environment, it's affecting their phone calls, and it's affecting their ability to ship and, deal with the manufacturing line for this particular organization. And those disruptions cost real dollars. So there's real value here by digging in. Again, as Tyler mentioned earlier, Eric and Scott too, that there's real visibility here that the firewall can provide for you, so you can dig in and help identify, and with simple few clicks. I mean, Scott, you were articulating earlier, I mean, how many clicks would it take to create some of these policies that you're talking about?
A lot of these are one-click policies. If you see it's going on in the network and you see it real time, you can one-click block it. You can one-click restrict it based on a group or a user. So, I mean, it's pretty easy to do. You mentioned VoIP. Just a quick thing on the VoIP, and I don't know which customers are on this line right now, but if you have a ShoreTel phone system, SonicWall has built-in bandwidth management rules and bandwidth prioritization rules for SonicWall voice over IP systems built into their phone system. Built into the firewall for that particular phone system. So, they do try to work with the VoIP providers. They have that one built in because at a time they used to use ShoreTel in their system in-house. So those rules are already there for you. You just have to turn them on, and it gives you all the prioritization that you need to make your voice traffic stable.
Thank you, Scott, for that. So as we move on, I'll go ahead. I'm sorry, Eric, did you want to say something?
No, this is Tyler, and just to add on to the content filtering bit, you can get as general as you want by literally clicking a box that says YouTube or Facebook, or you can get, or the admin can get, very granular with that and restrict, particular users from going on those websites, particular computers and such. So a lot of it's to the discretion of the admin on how they want to run their network. And it goes straight back to your slide, Nate, with return on investment, per employee.
Gotcha. Yeah. Yeah, and again, it can be fine-tuned to your organization. So one of the things that I want to bring up on this next slide, as far as talking about how this cost savings is, I mean, businesses, when they pay for other utilities, electricity, gas, or people at their homes, I mean, you don't keep your furnace running all summer because you don't need to, and because it costs money. You don't keep your air conditioning running all the time. You adjust your thermostat. So, do you turn off lights when you leave a room? Why? Well, because it costs money. So, but most organizations aren't managing their bandwidth. So it's another utility that you pay for, and it has a dramatic impact on the productivity of your organization. And there's simple things you can do to really manage it. So contact if it's not Mytech, contact your IT provider, and they can help you fine tune some of these things that really give you some bang for your buck and some return on investment. And I put a simple estimate here at the bottom as far as the cost of internet connections. I mean, so I was thinking of like a savings of maybe $100. I mean, that's just the delta. I mean, the organization that I was referencing earlier, they were talking about, connectivity fees in the thousands of dollars per month, and they could easily, instead of having to increase their bandwidth and thus pay more, if we just manage the bandwidth that they have better, they won't have to buy more bandwidth. So they won't have to increase their costs. They won't have to pay for more. So this is where some of the costs of savings can happen by risk mitigation and actually just managing your bandwidth more effectively. So a little cost calculator here. So if you have, again, going to a firm of around 30 people, if you can eliminate one rebuild per machine over 5 years, which I believe you can do if you effectively put these technologies in place and fine-tune to your organization, just in the savings of cost to your IT provider, you can save $7,500 probably over a 5-year period of time. Now, that doesn't calculate any productivity gains or losses from your staff because they wouldn't have those machines available to them during that rebuild time or the cleanup time. And then, if you look at some modest internet savings over a 5-year period, even if it's just $100 a month times 60 months, you got $6,000 of savings, and that can go, that scales depending on how much you're paying for your bandwidth by just making sure that you use the technology that you already own. So that really can basically completes the risk mitigation section as far as having this little cost calculator and understanding how this can impact your organization in a different way. So now we're going to move on to current trends and new technology. This is where we're going to dig into a little bit of the technology as far as what are some of the trends that exist in the industry that are not going away. This isn't a fad. Some people joke that the internet's a fad. Obviously, the internet's not a fad, and it's not going away. And these trends are actually only going to increase the need to do the things we were just talking about. So making sure that you implement basic content filtering, help with improving productivity, you make sure you're doing risk mitigation. All this stuff we're about to talk about is because these trends are continuing. It's just increase the need to be able to effectively do this for your organization. And so Scott's going to dig into what to expect from new technology and to make sure to prepare your organization for the future. So I'm going to hand it over to, I think probably Scott's going to talk about this with regard to macro IT trends and some of the things that we're seeing and how the firewalls then are evolving to be able to handle that technology for your organizations.
Yeah, thanks, Nate. I'm not going to spend too much time on this slide here because a lot of us know and see that this is kind of how the world is going to, right? Everybody wants to have the big new term now is BYOD. It's been around for about a year now, a little bit longer. And, what does that mean to your organization? What does the Web 2.0 mean? And why is everybody going to the cloud and things like that? Well, with all those different things that are happening in your network, what do you need to do to make sure that your network is still secure and safe? Well, that's why Dell SonicWall came out with their latest Generation 6 firewalls, is to kind of look at some of these things that are happening in the marketplace and build an appliance that can handle all these new trends that are happening because everybody's sending all their data to the cloud and things like that. Nate, if you want to go to the next one for me. So with their new Gen 6 product line that they came out, the biggest change that they added was 10 gig to the SMB market space. Now, why is that important? Well, Nate keeps on talking about bandwidth, right? Well, if you're sending information to the cloud and you're using the cloud for your applications, whether it's Salesforce or you're a medical office and you're using the cloud for your EMR solution, which is going to be mandated in the state of Minnesota here next year, then you need that bandwidth in order to maintain good work environments for your employees. Because if you have a customer, if you have an employee that is trying to pull down a medical image and they have it hosted in the cloud and they don't have enough bandwidth or their network appliance isn't configured properly and they're waiting 15, 20, 30 seconds for that image to populate, every time they try and do something, that's a lot of productivity loss and a lot of upset patients that are sitting at the desk waiting for them to give them the information of whether it's an image coming down for the doctor itself in a surgery room or it's a customer that's up at the front desk waiting to try and find another appointment. And they have to go through day to day to day, and it's taking 12, 13, 14 seconds each time that patient representative is going from day to day to day. That's just too much productivity loss. So what they did was they're like, well, how can we make it better? How can we make it faster? Well, what increases the strength and the speed of a firewall? Processing power. One of those things, again, was the 10 gig. We have a customer in Plymouth, Minnesota that put in 10 gig. They're an oral surgeon's office. They put in 10 gig internet connection with the 3600, with a new Dell SonicWall 3600. Why do they go through that expense and why do they go through that? Well, because they are hosting EMR in the cloud and they have 3D images that they send to the cloud. They're 1.2 gigs a piece per image. They come down in about 7 seconds with that 10 gig pipe. It used to take them almost a minute to pull down those images. Huge night and day difference. Great productivity gain for the customer. So what is the new Gen 6 products look like? They're a little different. If you guys are familiar with the old 3500, 35, 45, 55, 6500 series Sonic walls. Those are all Generation 5 products. A couple things that have changed. Again, we put in dedicated 10 gig ports. We put in a dedicated management port, and you have more density for 1 gig, both fiber and copper. The other thing we did is that the 6600 has dual redundant fans. But the biggest thing we did was we made the product faster. How do we make it faster? We added more cores and more processors. More processors. The more cores and the more processors you have equals better throughput, equals faster time when scanning for your IPS, IDS, gateway antivirus, anti-botnet. All those things that your network administrator will normally turn off because it reduces the speed of the box because we're doing deep packet inspection. We're actually diving into what you're doing every day. Well, with these new boxes, we've changed all that by adding additional bandwidth or additional processing power to make that faster for those customers, the end users. From the Gen 5 to the Gen 6, the average is about a 200% increase in everything that we do in the product. So the IPS IDS engine is faster because, again, we have more processors and more cores going at it. The stateful packet firewall, the deep packet firewall inspection, all that stuff is on average about 200% faster. It's a great box.
So sorry, go into that. No, that's right. Yeah. So as you go into these details, I mean, so the one thing that I always like to try and translate is, okay, great. So I would expect that some new technology is better and faster, right? So that's definitely indicated by the fact that SonicWall's invested and made sure that we're getting an average of over 200% increase. So how do when you translate that to why would a business need that? I mean, so from how does this technology set up the businesses, organizations, with current trends and things like that? What is that protecting them against, or what are we buffering against for the future over the next several years?
Well, as you mentioned earlier, Nate, what happens when somebody complains that the network is slow? They turn off security services. Well, when you turn off security services, what are you doing? You're allowing threats to get into your network. Mm-hmm. Well, by speeding up those services and making that box faster, makes your network faster, makes it less likely that you're going to turn the services off, and you're actually going to get the benefit of having those security services at your edge of your network to protect your company against all the threats that we've talked about earlier. And again, the design is to try and bring, on average, a firewall lasts roughly 3 years. Our goal now is to get 3 to 5 years out of that firewall by making it a better box, giving you more port density, bringing the 10 gig to the SMB market space. So that's ultimately the goals of why we're continuing down this path. And if you're a large customer, a large enterprise customer, we have the Supermassive 9000 and Supermassive 10,000 with up to 92 cores. I mean, the Supermassive 10,000 is what runs U.S. Cellular's 4G LTE data network for all of their calls in Chicago.
This stuff it fascinates me, and I'm gonna break it down to an analogy that I learned when I was in college and I was working at a restaurant. One of the things that's always important at a restaurant, and this translates to productivity time for people, is if I'll use a gallon of ranch as an example. So you think that where do you lose your money in food costs, right? Is it because someone accidentally dropped that gallon of ranch that's spilled all over the floor that you can't use? Or is it every single time you put a ladle of ranch on a salad or a ladle of ranch for a side dish and you get 2.5 ounces instead of 2, right? So and the reality is it's actually the little things that you do all day, every day, times every single person in your organization that end up costing you the most amount of money. And that's what this technology is designed to help, is make sure that you get, every time that person clicks that, it's not taking 30 seconds, it's taking 2. Every time that a person's trying to go to Salesforce.com, it doesn't take a second to advance to the next page. It happens nearly instantaneously. It's the little things over time, every day, that really, and improving that kind of productivity and performance is where you can realize the savings and productivity efficiencies in your organization. It's not the fact that, something might take 1 minute, one time, that's really going to cost you a lot of money. So that's really where SonicWall is going, as far as, making sure that they've got the right horsepower to enable your business to fine-tune this technology to your organization so that you can actually, realize some return on investment, through again, this technology that you already own, or that you're going to have to make an investment on here, over the next 3 to 5 years. So, in summary of all that, any other comments on that, either Scott or Eric or Tyler?
Yeah, Nate, this is Tyler. And just to add on a bit there, threats in our cybersecurity world have evolved. Traditional firewalls and intrusion prevention services have not. So you're absolutely right. The older firewalls that the customers have out there, at the end of the day, they're going to be more expensive to deploy and more expensive to manage. Not only is it going to cost you money in your pocket, it's not going to be able to detect or block malware that's coming into your network. It can't identify any type of traffic per user, and you're trading off security for maybe a bit more performance. So the great thing with the next generation Sonic walls, the NSA 3600s, 4600s, etc. Not only are you getting the deep packet inspection, but just like Scott said, the processing speed, the horsepower, is going to be able to keep up with the internet bandwidth that you're paying for. So, SonicWall's, doing a great job in leading the pack to make sure you're getting your most ROI per person and per network that the customers are running.
Yeah, thanks, Tyler. And I tell you, one of the things that I can't reinforce enough of that message as far as how, we are absolutely seeing a trend of people either taking individual applications like email and hosting it, or as Scott was referencing, taking entire electronic medical record systems and hosting them. But moving your infrastructure to a cloud environment is a continuing trend, and the threats that are evolving are all going to put more and more pressure on this technology. And so we need to make sure that we have a good amount of horsepower that matches with your business's objectives, so that you can effectively deliver the right service to your staff so they can do their job, while also delivering effective security against today's threats and tomorrow's threats for the next several years. So, and you're absolutely right. SonicWall has been leading the pack on that, the security and the throughput balance, across the firewall industry, especially in the small, medium, and even the enterprise space. So, as a summary, sorry, any other comment on that? So as a summary, we really talked about how we can improve staff productivity. And, don't think about, too many people I feel that I've talked to feel that this is being Big Brother. It's really about identifying little fine-tuning things you can do, 5 to 10% of improvement, right? And even that kind of adjustment can give you a huge saving potential on an annual basis of again, it's the 2.5 ounces of ranch versus the 2 ounces of ranch. Every single time you do it, every day, by every employee can realize a huge saving potential over time. And then, of course, risk mitigation equals cost savings, right? Protecting your machines from getting infected that might have productivity effects over time, right? Your machine doesn't all of a sudden stop typically. It slowly degrades over time because you haven't done the things to keep it up to date. So there's staff productivity issues there, as well as potential time loss for rebuilds. And, just doing a simple estimate of saving time on rebuilds and saving time on internet by managing your bandwidth effectively, you can easily, an organization of 30 can easily save over $13,000 over a 5-year period of time. And that includes management, the box, and everything. So a total ROI, when we sent out the invitation for this this discussion, we said a minimum of 20x ROI. So if you throw those numbers together, and we haven't even factored all the variables, but just those few variables together, you can get a total ROI of anywhere from 30 to 60 times based on the investment that you would make in your network security plan. So one of these technology tools that most technologies does not have a return on investment like this, but this one does. And finally, I want to thank Scott and everyone from the Dell SonicWall team for participating and really digging into how the new technology and the current trends are going to prepare your organizations for the future. So, unless there's any final comments, like I said, I do want to thank Eric, Tyler, and Scott for participating and being a partner of Mytech through the years, and being able to work with our customers and help them with the technology's best return on investment. Any other comments, guys? All right. With none heard, it's 12:01. We are signing off. Thank you very much, everyone. Hope you have a great day. And we will be posting this on our website as a recording if you want to forward on to any of your colleagues who weren't able to make it today or for future reference. Thanks a lot. Have a great day. Bye.